Hello everyone, welcome to the 8th video of this tutorial series in Android application development using Kotlin. So in this video, we're going to go into a theory for architecture pattern. And why this topic today? Because I've been through a lot of tutorials in Android and most of them have focused just on the coding part of Android and not the architecture patterns. Whenever we're talking about in a series, there are specific videos about architecture patterns, but most of the tutorial series on Android, they just go from starting hello world application to the end of your project, wherever that may be, and they just go into one style of coding. And I haven't seen a lot of talk about architecture pattern in those series, so I wanted to introduce my audience to those architecture patterns and also move forward in the series using those architecture patterns and getting familiarized with those architecture patterns. So hence this video is a little deviation from our coding part, but it will be very much knowledgeable to all of you who want to learn Android application development, not only just the coding part but with proper coding architecture also. So let's go ahead. First of all, I'd like to talk to you about architecture pattern. So what is architecture pattern? Before going that, I would like to discuss that our target is building an Android application. So whatever coding we're going to do, our main target of that coding is we want to build an Android application. But whenever we are starting to code our Android application, do we think about updating that application ever? Imagine you're building an application for any corporate client. First of all, you get the requirements, you verify the requirements, then you start building the application. Once you complete the application, you test it and submit it to the client. But do you ever think that the client could come back with some requirement changes later on sometime also? Is there any space in your code to adapt such client changes? Do you even think about updating the application? The application, is never over at version 1. There are a lot of applications in your phone right now also which did not end at version 1, and those that ended at version 1 or those applications that ended their updates did not last in the market for long. So target is not only to build an Android application, but we should also think about maintaining it and updating it on the long run. So what are the problems during this process or while going through this update process? What are the challenges that we need to face? Obviously, as a developer, we want those changes to be implemented in our code base very easily. But how can we achieve that? Well, one answer to your question can be architecture pattern. But architecture pattern can be very complex for a beginner developer. That's a definitive true statement. Architecture pattern can be very difficult for a beginner developer because until and unless you understand the concepts of development, you cannot focus yourself on architecture patterns. So even as a beginner developer, there might be confusion whether to go through it or not. And also some people complain that architecture patterns are actually very high level. For example, if I am querying a result of a database from my application, whenever I'm doing it in a simple way, I might have to write like 30 or 40 lines of code. But when I'm following a certain architecture pattern like MVP or MVVM, I'll have to make a lot of files, a lot of class, separate files for model, separate files for controller, and then define controller, model, and their communication in a different way. The number of files and the number of lines of code goes on increasing. So it's too high level. Why do I need to implement that? That's the concern of some people. And some people think, will it really be fruitful to learn architecture pattern? The answer is here. What architecture pattern does is it provides abstraction to your code. What that means is you only expose a certain aspect of your code which is important for your operation, or all other backward complexity is hidden. All of the unimportant stuff from your code are being hidden from being exposed. Not only that, but software architecture also helps with scalability and maintainability of your code. It will be easier for you to add features. It will be easier for you to make any kind of change in your system, because client changes are inevitable. Whenever you're working as a developer, you always have to face these requirement changes from your clients. Let me give you a scenario. You've started building an application based on a client requirement. You're 2 months into development, and suddenly the client one day sees something on another application and then wants you to implement that same thing there. Now, think about the code base written in a very primitive way, and then think about a code base written in a certain pattern. Now, to adapt those system changes, it would be easier to do it in the code base where a certain architecture pattern is followed. If you go on changing the code which is written in the primitive way, that would take you a lot of time. Also, it would help you maintain the quality of application. And one thing I'd like you to note here is, once the project is over, if you need to change your code at that time, that cost of changing code can be 80% of the total cost or the total project cost. And that is the case when you have to change code after your deployment. So, I think from these slides, you can gather this information that architecture patterns on one hand can be complex, on one hand can be high level, but on the other hand, they will help you in maintaining your application, in scaling your applications to a larger scale, and in updating your applications continuously. One thing this architecture pattern follows or adapts is separation of concern. I'll talk to you about that in the other video. Thank you for listening. If you are confused about anything, please drop your comment in the comment section below and I'll try to address it. See you in the other video. Thank you.